In this video, we're going to start looking at the scripting editor and starting to learn the basics of programming with the JavaScript programming language. A lot of making games is in the programming, so we're going to spend a lot of time learning how to program here, but we'll take it step by step, and by the end you should have a pretty good grasp of basic programming methods and structures. So first thing we need to do to add a script to our Unity project is to create it. So we're going to go right here in our project panel, and you'll notice there's a create button right here. If I click it, I see my different kinds of scripts here that I can create. Unity will work with JavaScript, C#, Boo. You can write shader scripts and compute shaders. We're going to be using JavaScript here for our projects. So you go to the Create tab, click on JavaScript. You'll see here in our assets it generates a new behavior JavaScript file. So we can rename this whatever we want right here. If I just click here or click and drag, I can select that and I can type a new name in. We're going to call this Scripting Basics. And then you have to hit enter on your keyboard once you're done typing it, and you'll see Scripting Basics. Now you notice when I type the name of this, I typed it as all one word. So let me drag this out here, or you can see it up here in the inspector, Scripting Basics. You can put spaces in script names, but sometimes that will cause you some problems. So I always type my script names without any spaces. You could put an underscore in here if you really want it. I'm typing this in what's called camel case. Camel case is a way of typing things that we use in programming languages to make them readable, but keep them all one word. And this will be capital camel case because I started with a capital S. And then instead of putting a space between the two words, I made that next word's first letter capital. So the B in basics is capital. And if I was typing several words here, the beginning of each word would just have a capital letter. And it's pretty easy to read that. That's called camel case. And we use that a lot in programming. Since once we start writing our program, things can't have spaces in them if we want it to be all part of the same name. And you'll see that as we go along. So that's just an introduction to the idea of this camel case way of typing. Alright, so we've made our file. This is an empty JavaScript file. And to be able to edit it, all I have to do is double click it right here. So we'll double left click, and that's going to open our scripting editor window. And it may take a few moments for that to open up. Alright, here we have our scripting editor opening up. This is called MonoDevelop. It comes packaged with Unity, and this is the one that we're going to be using for all of our Unity projects. So I'm going to just resize this window here and put it side by side with my editor for right now. Okay, you'll notice that in the scripting editor here, our MonoDevelop, that we have some file tabs across the top. We have a line of buttons here that we have access to. And then here's the name of the file that we have open, scriptingbasics.js. The JS stands for JavaScript. And then it goes ahead and fills in a couple of starting things for us. This first line, pragma strict, is a command that forces us to use a certain way of formatting inside of our file, and it's I think it's a good idea to keep it there. Some people program JavaScript a little differently, but this forces us to pay a little more attention to naming things and declaring variables, which you'll learn all about here in just a little bit, and it helps us not to make mistakes as easily. All right. So what I'm going to do here first of all is I'm going to get rid of all this extra stuff it put out. So this is just like any text editor. I can just click and drag to select. I can hit delete to get rid of things. You'll notice you have line numbers on the side that will help you to refer to different areas. And so here's a basic, just empty blank JavaScript file with just that pragmastrict hashtag in the top. The first thing we're going to learn about in programming in JavaScript is the idea of variables. A variable is a storage place to put information. In our games and programs, we have to keep track of lots of different types of information. We do that in what's called a variable. It's just a little storage box. Think of it like a little file box or a file drawer. You give it a name, you throw information in there, and whenever you want access to that information, you just look inside that box that you gave the name to. So there are several main types of variables, and we're going to go over each one. To declare a variable in here, we use the keyword var, V-A-R, just like that. And then we're going to put a space. Now you'll see that it put this text in blue. If you see something in blue inside of our editor, that tells you that the computer recognizes what it is. It's a reserved word that we can't use for anything else. So var is short for variable. So every time we declare a variable, we start with a var. Then after the space, we give it a name. So let's call this ammo. So we're going to have a game here. We've got to keep track of ammo. So we're making a variable called ammo. We put a colon after our variable name, and then we have to tell it what type of information to store in this box called ammo, this variable called ammo. Well, we want this to keep track of how many rounds of ammo we have, let's say. So that's going to be a whole number or an integer. So I'm going to type in int for integer. And now this variable called ammo can only store a whole number. Integers can be negative or positive whole numbers. Now, we're going to tab over a couple of times. I'm going to do 2 forward slashes. When I do that, it turns green. This is the way that we can put a comment in our code. Comments are notes to yourself or to other people who may look at your script. So the computer sees 2 slashes and it ignores whatever's after it, and those will be in green. So I'm going to make a note here, or a comment, 2 forward slashes. I'm going to say int is an integer that stores a positive or negative whole number. Oops. Right, that's an integer. So I now have declared a variable. Whenever we do this var command here, that's called declaring a variable. So now in my script, it's going to know anytime I use the word ammo, spelled exactly like I have it here in my variable declaration, that I'm referring to this integer that's stored inside of there. Okay? So that's an integer. The next type of variable, so again, we're going to do a var. To do another one, we will do what's called a float. A float is a decimal number. So let's say we put in, let's say it's going to be money. We're going to keep track of how much money we have. So we do a variable, we're going to call it money, we put our colon, and this time we want a decimal number, which we call a float, F-L-O-A-T, just like that. Let's tab over, let's put a comment here, and this time we'll say float is a decimal number, and that's what it holds. Now, there's something that I have left off of both of these lines, and that is at the end of each of these we need a semicolon. A semicolon. So I'm going to go back in and add in a semicolon. Let's very important that we put semicolons at the end of our lines. A semicolon tells the computer that this is the end of this particular piece of information and not to look for anything else. If I don't put the semicolons in here, it will give me an error. So we need to make sure that we end our lines with semicolons. All right, so we have our variable for ammo is an integer, our variable for money is a float. Let's look at the other kind of variable types here. Var. Let's keep our name. We want to have a name for our player. What's his name going to be? So a name is going to be text, and a text is known as a string variable. So we're going to say name, string, and string is for text. Okay, that will store a text for us. So we can put any text, any kind of name in here that we want. So that's a string. And then another variable type that we're going to use here is what's called a Boolean variable, and that a Boolean holds true or false. It's a true-false variable. So let's say is alive as a Boolean, B-O-O-L-E-A-N, and Boolean holds a true or false value. Okay? Again, now when I made this name, you notice that I said is alive. I typed it all as one word, because if I put two separate words here, it would not recognize this as one name. It all has to be run together, no spaces. This is another example of using camel case. This is lower camel case because I started with a lowercase letter here, and then I'm just going to capitalize any first letter of any words that are part of this after that. When we do variables, we always make our variables start with a lowercase letter. There's different what are called the formatting conventions that we use in programming, and they may differ from place to place, wherever you're working, or for wherever you're going to school. But this is pretty standard to do variables with lowercase letters to start with. It helps us just kind of keep track of what type of thing this is when we see it later on in our program. Now I do notice I got a little mistake up here. I put a colon after string instead of a semicolon. So we're going to fix that. Alright, so we've made a couple of variable declarations here. I'm going to go ahead and save my file. So two different ways you can save a file that you're working on. You can go up here to the buttons on the top and click the little disk, and that will save it. Now you'll notice if I change, let me just put a space in here. Right here after the name of my file on this tab, you notice there's a little star. If there's a star there, it means you have not saved it. So something has changed since the last time you saved it. When I go up here and click the little save disk, it goes away. So that's one way to know if you've saved your file or not. Now, the second way to save your file is you can use a keyboard shortcut. If you hold your control key down and then push S, it will also save. So control S saves your file. Now, once you save a file, if you come over to your editor and you click, it will actually take a look at your file and it will look for errors. And it will tell us if there's any errors in the file. Now, one thing that's very useful for us when we start programming over in our editor is to have our console window. Now, the console window is not out here yet, so if you don't see your console window, go up to your menu bar where it says Window, go down to the bottom where it says Console, and click it. It will open your console window. Now, your console window will put messages for any errors that you have in your script. I always like to dock my console down here at the bottom. So again, remember, if you grab the tab, you can dock this in different places. So I like to dock my console down here. underneath my game view window, so we may have to kind of make a little space here for it. And now my console window is in here. Now, if I was to go back over here and make a mistake in my file, like let's say I forget to put a semicolon here, I save it, Control S, I come over here and click somewhere. Now I've got an error, and in my console it tells me right here, hey, there's an error here. Okay, little red exclamation point deal here, and it tells me a message here. It says a semicolon was expected. Insert a semicolon, and sometimes you can't read it all here. It'd be down at the bottom as well. Insert a semicolon at the end. So it's actually this time telling me, hey, I think you forgot a semicolon. It's right this time, so if I go over here and I put my semicolon back in and I save it again, Control S, and I come back over here and click somewhere in my editor window, it clears out. So now it's telling me, as far as it knows, there's no errors. It understands everything that I've typed so far. Alright, so so far we have, I'm just going to tab these over to line them all up so it's readable. So far we've looked at how we declare 4 different types of variables. You're going to want to be familiar with all these variables that we are using. These are the 4 main types of variables that we use in our program. And oh, I see another typo over here in my notes. False isn't spelled like that. False. There we go. Okay. And we are going to stop this video right here. These are our 4 variable types. In the next video, we are going to talk about how to actually put values into these variables and get values back out and change them.